Okay, it's Rita Vanacore, Planet Seniors, Radio Kingston, WKNY, 1490 on your AM dial, also on your computer and on your phone. We also have an app. Radio Kingston has an app, so you can get this whole program right on your phone. Sitting here with us tonight is Jeff Beals. He's a Democratic primary candidate for a congressional seat held by John Faso. And first of all, Jeff was sitting here listening to our questions, so he said he has a different answer. So I'm very excited to listen to it. Jeff, first of all, welcome. Thank you so much for agreeing to be here.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, and it's an honor. And that was a great question. And I do have a different answer. Now, you know, I'm a high school teacher in Woodstock. I'm a former United States diplomat, and I've cared about our government all my life, and I've cared a lot about voting. But this is unusual. You know, it is a congressional primary, and do you know how many people vote in a congressional primary?
No.
18,000 people voted in the last congressional primary. That's tiny.
Tiny. That's minute.
Okay. And I think that does go to the question, why don't people vote there? And why do some people not want to vote at all? Because you know who won the last presidential election. Mm-hmm. It's not who you think. It's none of the above.
No.
Most people didn't vote.
Exactly.
That's who won, and that's who wins in our politics.
Yes. Yeah.
And
millions did not vote.
Yes.
Millions.
And I will tell you why that is. And I'm not going to answer it by scolding all of those people, because some of them are onto something, which is that we have a lot of elections, but our politics doesn't change people's lives. A lot of the problems in people's lives have just kept getting worse. They're working harder and harder, and they're not making more. Wages have been stagnant for 40 years in our country, all while the costs of living have kept rising, your rent, your mortgage, your health bills. And a lot of people think, what am I voting for? What's the difference going to be? And my campaign is, in a weird way, you could say directed to the people who don't vote, because I think the answer to our politics is to solve that problem, to put forward a platform that will change the lives of the majority, the vast majority of people. That's what I want to do. And I'll tell you what my platform is. Number one, I want to see us enact Medicare for all in America. I think that we should have a national health program like the rest of the industrialized world. And you know what? That would change the life of so many people. Number two, I think we should increase Social Security benefits. Do you know that our Social Security program is far less than what we see in the rest of the industrialized world? People are getting about 30% of their former wages. In other countries, it's about over 50%. And that's because we have big loopholes that are allowing the wealthiest Americans to not even pay into the program like the rest of us. If you earn over $128,400, guess what? You don't pay a dime.
Pay in anymore.
For Social Security.
Doesn't support this.
That's
system.
So me, you, and Jeff Bezos, we're all paying up until we earn $128,000, which I don't.
Yeah.
And from then on, he keeps earning and don't pay a dime. That's wrong. I'll go to the next step. I think we should, for young people, be forgiving student loan debt.
Oh.
I think we have a generation that can't get off its feet because it is saddled with basically a mortgage and no house. That's what they have.
Yes.
And the last piece of it to me is I want to speak out. I would be the only former U.S. diplomat in Congress if I was elected to represent us. And I would use it to speak out against what has become a normal thing, which is endless war and vast military spending by this country, and argue for not spending those trillions overseas and instead putting it to work here on a national jobs program, a Green New Deal, and a federal jobs program where anybody who wants work can get it, building a green infrastructure in our country, doing elder care, building our parks, all in the style and the inspiration from FDR and his Works
WPA,
Progress administration.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to ask you, if I presented a platform like that and you went to that questioner and they said they don't want to vote, I would even ask the people who are listening, is there anybody listening whose life wouldn't be changed by us enacting that platform? And I would venture to say that it would change the lives of 99% of the people in our district. And I think when people realize that what's on the ballot is something that will change their lives, that we're going to break the real problem in our democracy, which isn't polarization or division or arguments over guns or other wedge issues.
Right.
It's that people don't think politics is going to make a difference. And if we could change that, then I think we changed everything.
Well, I agree with that. Okay, so kind of, other than the fact, again, that you've done very extensive work both in and with the government,
Yeah.
what do you believe separates you the most from the other candidates?
Well, certainly the number one thing is that I have extensive federal government experience. I served in the U.S. government over the course of a decade, and I would be coming to Congress and immediately be one of the strongest foreign policy voices in the United States Congress. And I would use it to speak out so loudly against this rush towards war and make sure that our voice is heard in our district where we want our resources put. The other thing that distinguishes me is that I voted against John Faso in the last election and have stood up to run the most progressive grassroots campaign in our election. And to me, that means standing up for a platform that really dares to turn down corporate money and corporate power and influence on our politics and speak for the people. It's why I was endorsed in this election by the People for Bernie, which is a national group that got behind his campaign, as well as Justice Democrats, which is a group of former staffers of Bernie Sanders who interviewed the candidates in our race and endorsed me because of the way I'm fundraising and because of the way I've dared to put forward a people's platform. So that's unique, my experience, my endorsements, and my platform.
Oh, I like that. Okay, my next question. The economic reports are telling us that the economy is the best it's ever been with only a 3-point-something unemployment rate. But is it better for all economic groups? And if so, why aren't we, the average working class, feeling it better?
It's not better for anybody except the top 1%. Don't believe the headlines. The headlines have been lying to us for a long, long time. It's kind of like a speedometer that's not attached to the engine or the wheels of the car. They keep telling us, look at it racing. Oh my gosh, look at the heights of the Dow Jones Industrial Average. We're all going to be rich. And it turns out that 80% of the stocks in the Dow are owned by 10% of the population.
Yes.
And it turns out that you can keep adding jobs all you want, but if you don't raise people's wages, it doesn't make a darn bit of difference. You know, I saw a hilarious point the other day. They made a headline. There are more jobs than there are people out of work in America. Isn't that great? And I thought, well, that's pretty funny. There are already more. Of course there's more jobs because people are working 2 jobs. People are working 3 jobs and still not getting by. Yeah. So until we address the fact that for the last 40 years, almost all of the gains of our economy have gone to the top 1% of Americans, and then after that, some of the top 10%, and the bottom 90, which is crazy to call it the 90 because that's the American people, have not participated in any income growth whatsoever. Until we recognize that, we're not being serious about our economy, and I really couldn't care less what the next statistical report is, because I have a better statistic. It's the fact that nobody has any money in their wallets and their pockets are inside out.
So trickle down doesn't work, as we've learned for 4 presidents.
Well, worse than that, something even worse doesn't work, which is politicians on both sides of the aisle who make deals with a financial sector and corporate America that is leaving working Americans out. I am cutting them off in this campaign. I'm very unique in that regard. They have a lot of money in the New York 19 primary. I'm sorry to tell you. They've put a lot of money even into Democratic candidates running in this race. And I'm telling you right now that the financial sector has accumulated so much wealth, and a few banks have accumulated so much wealth in our economy that it is strangling the opportunity for economic growth in communities like ours, to the point that I have heard the president say, if you live in upstate New York, you should move somewhere else. What is he talking about? So is the idea here that this community is going to be a second home playground for commuters or for weekenders? Now, look, I have no problem with us having a community of varied backgrounds, but I do believe that we should have our own economy. I do believe that people that work here should be able to afford a home here, and I do believe if you raise children here, like I am, that they should have a hope of staying here if they'd like to.
And getting a good education.
And getting a great education on top of it. So, you know, I want us to change that. And the truth is that the financial sector has gotten bigger since the great robbery of 2008. It's gotten larger. And for anybody out there who's wondering, do Democratic primaries matter? I wonder if you all paid attention to the Alabama election. There was a guy, Doug Jones, elected. And we clapped, we partied, okay, because that was great. We got a Democrat in the Senate and returned a seat. That's exciting. It is exciting. But did you know that a bill was put forward in the Senate to roll back some of the financial sector regulations that had been put in place after the crash of 2008? And did you know that Doug Jones voted to roll back those restrictions and give more freedom to the big banks? He did that because he raised hundreds of thousands of dollars from Wall Street to ensure that victory. And that's not what we need happening right now. That's a mistake. And I think it matters what Democrat you put in Congress. It matters who wins this primary. And I hope the listeners who agree with that and want something more than just the defeat of John Faso, which I guarantee, by the way, but if they want something more than that, something to address the deepest problems in our country, well, I hope they'll cast a ballot for Jeff Beals.
I saw in one of the news broadcasts, or maybe on the Young Turks or whatever, that the DNC is trying to pass some regulations so that if you don't claim to be an actual Democrat, that you would not be endorsed by the DNC. Is that a truth? Is it just a fake news thing that's going around? Or?
I saw the articles too, and I don't know, I don't have any more information than you have. I can only tell you that when you start getting obsessed with people signing loyalty pledges and oaths, you're probably heading in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Why don't you just put forward a platform that rallies people, that they want to support in huge numbers and represent, and then you know what'll happen? Loyalty will follow.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the truth, when we talk about who's a Democrat, I don't even know if FDR and Harry Truman would recognize some of the Democratic Party today. So maybe they wouldn't be Democrats, but I am pretty sure they are.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're the lifeblood and the heart and the legacy of the party.
Yeah, they're the truth.
They are. And isn't it profound? I mean, I honestly, if you want to know the things that give me the chills running for Congress, I cannot believe I'm running for Congress in the district that includes Hyde Park. I can't believe it. It's the most inspiring thing. I took my students on a trip there. It's just so inspiring. And it to me, it's also a sacred responsibility to be a Democrat with a capital D.
Oh, yeah,
and
absolutely.
a Democrat aware of what the legacy of the party would be. Because, if working people can't depend on the Democratic Party to stand up to corporate power, to stand up for their wages, to stand up for unions, to stand up against big banks and the forces of organized money, if they can't count on the Democrats to do that every time with their backs against the wall, then they got nothing to count on anymore.
Yeah.
So we have to be that voice.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what happened to all the regulations and the laws that protected us from large conglomerates taking over and annihilating the mom and pops? What happened to all that? There was supposed to be something about antitrust and all that kind of stuff, and that's kind of like Walmart's taking over.
Right.
All those big stores are just buying up. Toys R Us just went out because some non-entity that we don't know of saddled them with all their debt, and now they're gone.
My aunt worked there.
Yeah, I mean, what happened to the regulations?
Exactly.
Where are they?
I'll tell you what happened. Big donors who were tied in to the ascendant political fortunes in America wound up contributing to political campaigns in great numbers, to the point that they convinced politicians to reconsider what they should be doing on financial policy and on business policy. For a long time in the United States, for 70 years, we broke up giant trusts and giant companies. We broke them up when they achieved too large of a market share. And right now, by the logic we used for many decades in this country very successfully, there would be big companies like Walmart, like Amazon.com,
right,
like the tech giants, that would be broken up immediately, as well as big banks like Goldman Sachs. It would have been a no-brainer. It would have been done on day one by Harry Truman. If he were in office seeing this, Teddy Roosevelt, a Republican who was progressive, would have spoken out and done this. What they did, if you want to know the history, is they changed the criteria. They said, you know what we're going to do? Instead of judging whether or not something should be broken up because of market share, we'll judge it by consumer benefit. And they decided that if prices go down because of a merger, then that means it's good for the public. So on that logic, they allowed companies like Walmart to begin underselling, often rapaciously, small businesses left and right, putting them out of business. The same thing for Amazon, selling at a loss, doing things that used to be illegal in our economy so as to build up a larger market share. And they said, this is going to be good for the people. We won't step in. What they ignored is that while that was going on, wages were being slashed, no benefits were being provided to employees, no taxes were being paid by these companies, and enormous damage was being done to our economy and our communities. And it's one of the great disappointments, frankly, over the last many years that Democrats haven't taken action on this, because you know who does the antitrust work. You don't need congressional approval. It can be done by the Justice Department. It can be put forward. And so the President of the United States, who was a Democrat before this one, did have it in power to do that and didn't. And I think we need to.
Yeah. Okay, we've been speaking with Jeff Beals. Jeff is a Democrat candidate in the primary that's coming up June 26th. Jeff, I'm going to say thank you, but before you leave us, I need you to give me your closing statement.
My closing statement is simply this. I've stood up to run for Congress because I care so deeply about this country and have served it throughout my life and have seen it take a turn that I didn't want to see. Not for my sons, not for my students, not for our seniors, not for the working people of our home and here in Kingston, where more than 61% of them are the working poor. And I think this moment has to be more than just a primary. It should be the awakening to a new politics in our country that will finally, in the style of the great social movements that provided women the right to vote, that abolished slavery, that took the enormous steps in our country's history, let us pass Medicare for all. Let us end this endless war. Let us forgive student loan debt, raise Social Security benefits. Let's change our country and our trajectory. I think this is the inflection point. I have an unofficial slogan for my campaign. It is called, "It is always darkest before the dawn." And I think the darkness that we're seeing right now means the dawn's approaching, and I hope people will remember Jeff Beals and check out my website, bealsforcongress.com, BEALS for Congress.com, and remember to vote on June 26th. I will fight for us.
Oh, thank you, Jeff, so much. And yes, remember, the 26th, if you are a registered Democrat, please, I beg you, go out and cast your vote.